Hi guys, this video is going to be about psychiatric hospitalizations, and I have a little bit of a feeling that it's going to be kind of a controversial video. Most of the videos that I see about psychiatric hospitalizations are extremely negative, and it's really rare to see videos about positive experiences. And so the reason that I wanted to make this video was because the first time that I was hospitalized, I was absolutely terrified to go. And I couldn't find any information other than kind of things that you typically see on TV or in movies, like people in restraints, people being like forced to take medication and things like that. And I just assumed that it was going to be this extremely terrifying place and that it was going to be an overall terrible experience. Thankfully, this was not the experience that I've had in any of my hospitalizations, but I do want to give just a little bit of a disclaimer because bad experiences do happen, and I'm not trying to invalidate those experiences. I've had some really bad and traumatic experiences during my hospitalizations as well that have been extremely difficult for me, but still, overall, the hospitalization has always served its purpose and it has never been as bad as I see it portrayed kind of in the media. So I think it's really important to also share some positive experiences about hospitalization because it could be life saving. Negative videos tend to get a lot of attention, and unfortunately, this could cause someone to just be too afraid to go to get the help that they need. So I figured that I would share a little bit about my experiences in hope to make someone feel a little bit more comfortable if hospitalization is something that they end up having to do. So I'm going to start by talking a little bit about the process that I've gone through. So I have gone to the hospital 4 times. I've been admitted every time. I know you don't always get admitted when you go, but the 4 times I've gone, I've been admitted. The first time I went was actually like I think 2 or 3 weeks after seeing my new therapist, and I feel kind of bad about that because in my intake I was like, yeah, I don't think I really have that many problems. Like, I have depression, but, like, it's not that bad. And then 2 weeks later, I was hospitalized by him, which was actually really a wonderful thing. I know that's kind of, like, weird to say because going to the hospital is definitely not fun, but, for me, this really felt so validating. I had seen so many different therapists, and I had never been taken seriously with my problems, and so for me, him sending me to the hospital kind of very soon after meeting me just was so validating because I was like, "Oh, wow, somebody is actually taking me seriously." And that was, difficult, but also really, really good for the therapeutic relationship. So I'm really thankful for that. So every time I've gone, I think with the exception of one time, I've gone right from my therapist's office. One time I went from home after a call with my therapist. So this, I think, has made the process a lot easier for me. So starting, I was in my therapist's office. We discussed hospitalization. We both kind of determined that this was the best thing for me to do at the time. And so my therapist would call the emergency room of whichever hospital I was going to. There's a couple different ones in my area. So he would call, and when he called, he basically just gave them a little bit of information that helped smooth out the process. So he gave them, my name, my birthday, and then just kind of like a um, little basic explanation of what was going on and why I would be coming in, and also let them know about how long it would be for me to come in. And I've never had to go by ambulance. I know if you don't have like a safe ride to get there, they will send an ambulance. But in my cases, my therapist was like, she doesn't need a ride. She has her husband who's coming to, pick her up from my office. So she's safe here with me. And then he's going to pick her up and bring her right to the hospital. So I've never had to take an ambulance ride. So I can't really speak to what that would feel like. So after the phone call would end, I would go to the ER, and when I was there, basically, I think this is pretty standard at most hospitals and every emergency room. When you go in, there's someone at a desk, and they ask you what you're there for, so they can triage you to see, kind of basically how quickly you're going to get taken back, depending on the severity of your issues. If you go in and say that you are there because you are having suicidal thoughts, they will take you in immediately. So every time I've gone, I've told them, my name, my birthday, everything. I've told them that I'm there because I am suicidal, and then they take me right in. And once I go in, I start by talking to a nurse who typically just gets the basic medical kind of information from you. They ask you things about like, are you in physical pain currently? Like, have you taken anything to hurt yourself? And then they ask you just, basic questions like allergies, age, any significant medical history, just to get some basic information to get you into the system and in case there's anything important that they need to know. And then from there, they ask why you're there. So this is the part that has always been, I think, very difficult for me because they want to know specifics. So if you say that you're there because you're suicidal, they ask you if you have a plan and they ask you what your plan is. It's actually pretty important to go through your plan in detail with the nurses there, as uncomfortable and terrible and emotional as it can be, because it helps give them a better idea of what you're going to need from them, and it'll help build a case for you to be admitted if you do end up needing to be admitted. So it's really difficult, but it's so important to try to be honest in those situations. From there, you're usually taken into the actual emergency room. You have to change out of your clothes into hospital clothes, and then they take your personal belongings. So, phone, jewelry, kind of anything you have on you, they're going to take and they're going to lock it up somewhere. This is also really uncomfortable. And a lot of people, and myself included, find it really embarrassing. And yeah, it's not great, but like it's for your safety. And that's the biggest thing that I want to like try to remind myself of and other people of when they're going through this, because it can kind of feel like you're being dehumanized a little bit, but that's not at all the intention. Everything that's done there is for your safety. So they just want to make sure that you don't have anything on you that you're going to use to hurt yourself while you're there. And then kind of going along with that, typically they'll ask you if you can contract for safety while you're in the hospital. So this means they just ask if you can agree to not do anything to harm yourself while you're there in the hospital. If you say yes, they typically are a little bit more lenient with you. If you say no, they will make sure that you have a one-to-one. So you have someone that is always sitting directly with you. I've never had a one-to-one specifically like that, but typically what they do for any of like the higher risk patients is they put them in a room right in front of the nurse's station. So there's always someone kind of looking into your room, if not sitting in your room, just so they can make sure that you're okay and that you're just being safe and staying safe there. I have actually had really great experiences with the nurses that are sitting in front of my room. I've had a lot of really good conversations with them, and they've been, in my experience, they've all been really nice and really understanding. And I thought that that was really cool because again, a common thing that I hear is that the nurses treat psych patients really poorly and they treat you like you're not human and like you have all these issues. I've never had that experience with a nurse in the emergency room. They've always just been so nice to me, which again, that has been my experience. And I completely understand that that is not everyone's experience. So there are cases where people have had really negative experiences. And I've had some in different areas of the hospital when I've been there for psych where the nurses are just kind of rude and mean. So it does happen, unfortunately, but it's not the only type of interaction that you're going to have. So that's really important to remember. So once you're set up in the emergency room, you typically have to get medically cleared in order to move on to kind of whatever the next step is. So for me, what usually has happened is that I've seen a doctor. So a doctor will come in, they'll ask you to go through the same thing, like why you're there, what your plan was, and then they ask if you have taken anything or done anything to hurt yourself, just to make sure that like there's nothing medically that needs to be done for you right away. And I've had really good experiences with the ER doctors as well. They've treated me very nicely, which I am extremely thankful for because I know that is not always the case. And then during this part as well, you typically have to get a blood test and a urine test just to check, make sure you aren't taking any drugs or just make sure everything is okay. And the funny thing for me, at least, was you also have to take a breathalyzer. And the first time I had been hospitalized, I had never taken a breathalyzer before. And I had no idea how to do it. And it was like extremely embarrassing. But it led to like kind of a funny conversation between me and the tech that was trying to teach me how to do the breathalyzer, which they're not hard to do, but I somehow managed to do it wrong first time, so I had to do it twice, which was embarrassing, but also kind of funny, and I love to look for humor in difficult situations, so that is one of the things I look back on kind of fondly because it was just so ridiculous that I had no idea what to do, and you just have to blow into a straw, and I was like, "What do I do with this?" So that was fun. Um, but yeah, once you're cleared medically, they then will typically move you to a crisis unit. So in my experience with the crisis unit at the hospital that I've gone to the same hospital all 4 times, and I've heard just from other people that I know that the other hospitals in the area are set up this way as well. The crisis unit is basically like an emergency department, but specifically for psych. So you have your own little room. In the one I've gone to, there's cameras in the room, which means that you can have your door closed and you don't have to have anyone in there with you, but they are, monitoring you for safety on a camera and they have to let you know that beforehand. So like they inform you that there's a camera in the room that they will be, monitoring just to make sure that you're okay. This is typically it takes a long time once you're in there, at least for me. It's a lot of the times I'm in there overnight, which is nice because I have my own room, I have a bed, I get to sleep, which is great. It's difficult to sleep sometimes. It can be a little bit loud in there depending on how many other patients are in there. But typically, I've been able to close my door and at least get a little bit of rest while I am waiting. And then in the crisis unit is where you're seen by a social worker. So the social worker is kind of gonna go through everything that you have basically already gone through, which is again the kind of annoying part because you are continuing to tell your story a million times and it is exhausting. So they ask you, why you're there, what your plan was. They will generally ask you, like, if you have a history of any other psychiatric hospitalizations, if you have a diagnosis history, medications that you take, and then typically they'll ask you about if you see any outpatient providers. So if you have your own therapist or psychiatrist, they like to know that too and kind of how long you've been with them. I've had really wonderful experiences with the social workers in the emergency department. They have been extremely nice. The one I saw actually in my most recent hospitalization a couple months ago he was so nice to me. And he was like, one thing that he told me that I just like, I almost cried because I was just like, I was stressed. I was really unhappy. I was in the hospital. I was frustrated that I was back there again because I really didn't want to be. And he told me, I can tell that you're trying really hard. And it's amazing that you were able to bring yourself in here instead of going through with your plan. And he's like, I think that that is a really good sign. And I am going to do whatever I can to help you get the help that you need while you're here. And that was great. It felt so good. Having one good experience with a social worker or a nurse or anyone really in the process of being hospitalized for psychiatric stuff can make a huge difference on how you feel for like the rest of the day. So I was so thankful for him that last time. And then typically after the social worker talks to you, they'll usually call your therapist if you have one just to get some more information from them, kind of confirm your story, and then get your therapist's input for if you should be admitted or not, because they still have to make that decision. After they talk to your therapist, they will, like in my case, they've also called my husband to ask him. And then the social worker will talk to a psychiatrist that works on the actual psych unit in the hospital. And they will discuss your case and decide if you are going to be admitted or if you are going to be discharged. I've had to fight for admission pretty much every time except for the last time because that social worker was like so great. And this can be really invalidating to feel because every time I've gone, they've been like, we don't actually think that you need to be here. And I've been able to be like, if you send me home, I'm probably going to go through with my plan. And I really do need the help. So This is also where having a really good therapist will help because every time my therapist has also been able to tell them, like, "No, she really needs to be admitted." And that, has been really helpful, and all 4 times I've gone, I've ended up getting admitted with just a little bit of back and forth. So once you're admitted, they're gonna ask you to sign some papers. I think the papers I've had to sign was if you are admitted, you can't own a gun and you can't apply to get a gun. So I've had to just, sign saying that I agree with that, and then also signing, consenting to the admission. And if you sign yourself in voluntarily, you have to be there for a minimum of 72 hours. So you can't sign yourself in and then immediately be like, "Oh, I actually want to leave now." Because, if you're there saying you're suicidal, they can't really just be like, "Okay, fine, you can go," because that's probably not a great situation. There are instances where you can fight this, but it is a very long, very annoying process. So every time I've just signed myself in and been like 72 hours, I'll probably be here for longer than that anyways, so it's fine. Um, Once you're admitted, then you're brought up to the floor. There's different types of units. I think some are more secure units where you're monitored all the time and like you have less freedom. I've always been in what they call like the community unit, so you have more freedom. You can leave your rooms, go in and out, kind of hang out with other patients, and it's kind of like being in a college dorm. Definitely not as fun and definitely a lot less freedom, but that's kind of the closest thing I can describe it to. When you're there, you meet with a psychiatrist and discuss possible med changes and kind of how you're doing, things like that. You also meet with a social worker who, again, talks to you about, why you're there and then helps to safety plan for discharge. Usually, most psych floors will have like group therapy basically. So like the ones I've gone to, they have some are specific like topics like meditation ones. Some are like fun ones like occupational therapy where we'll play a game as like a group, and those are good. Those are good to attend because they really help break up the day. They're typically, or for me, they've never been like mandatory, but it's highly encouraged that you go to them. And for me, like, there's not really a lot to do while you're there. So going to groups helps kind of make the day go by a little bit faster. And then beyond that, they usually have activities that you can do, like watching movies or like drawing or coloring, and playing board games and stuff. So it's pretty good. Like it's not fun, but there is fun stuff to do that helps, um, which I've enjoyed while I've been there. And then kind of from there, that's kind of what your days look like. It gets a little bit monotonous because it's kind of the same thing every day, and then you continue to work with the team there, so the nurses, the psychiatrist, and the social worker to kind of plan for your discharge and assess when you are stable enough to go home. And I like to really push for open communication with my outpatient providers. So usually I will talk to the social worker and request that they also call my therapist and tell him kind of what they're thinking. And then when I talk to the psychiatrist, I request that they call my outpatient psychiatrist to discuss things as well. And that has made things go a lot smoother, and it's helped with the transition, from leaving the hospital and going back like into the world again. So I'm going to end this video by just kind of talking about why psychiatric hospitalizations are important and why I feel that having some positive examples of hospitalizations is extremely important. Like I said, for me, the first time I went, I was so scared and I had like no frame of like a positive experience for this. And I am so thankful that this didn't deter me from going because I really didn't want to go. And I couldn't find any positive things to say about it. And I was just like so scared. Had I not gone, I probably would not be alive. So, one of the biggest reasons to go to the hospital for this is to stay alive. My therapist, I remember when I had to go back a second time, he told me something that also really stuck with me because after I had already been and left, I was like, shouldn't I be like better now? Which isn't really how, anything with mental health works. It would be great if you could go to the hospital and then magically be better. That's not really how it works. So when I was getting ready to go for my second hospitalization, I was so discouraged and I was just like, I am such a failure. Me going to the hospital again is a failure. I am doing the wrong thing. And my therapist said to me, no, you're not doing the wrong thing. And actually, this is a success because anything that you do to keep yourself alive should be considered a success. So go to the hospital if you feel that you cannot keep yourself safe, because that is the best thing that you can do for yourself. Another advantage to going to the hospital is they can speed along the process of getting med changes. So seeing an outpatient psychiatrist, sometimes there's a long wait list and it's hard to get appointments when you need to change your medications, things like that. So going to the hospital is a good way to quickly get your meds changed. That's what I did the first time. I was on Zoloft and it was not working, but I didn't have a regular psychiatrist yet. So they got me off of Zoloft and onto a couple different medications that worked a lot better for me. Another reason to go to the hospital is that they can help get you set up with outpatient providers. So if you don't have a therapist already and you don't have a psychiatrist already, they can help you find one. And that is really great for long-term care. And then the other thing that they can do is they can set you up in an intensive outpatient program or a partial hospitalization program. So those are programs that are a step above regular outpatient therapy and a step below complete hospitalization. So you go for, I think partial hospitalizations, you go 5 days a week. IOPs, you go, I think, 3. And you basically get, different group therapies. You see a psychiatrist, things like that. And so going to the hospital can really help set you up with that in a way that's a lot quicker, because I know right now there's like wait lists for almost everything mental health related. So overall, hospitalization is not fun. It can be scary and it can be very intimidating, especially if you've never gone before, but it is so worth it. It has saved my life multiple times, and I am always a big advocate for getting the help that you need. And if that means going to the hospital, there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. It is okay to be hospitalized. It's okay to need the extra help. It doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with you. And it is not like it is in the movies and in TV shows. It is not nearly as scary or intense. It can be scary, it can be intense, but it is not always like that, and it is not like that 100% of the time. So if you feel like you need to go, then you absolutely should go. And as always, thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you have any questions about this or want elaboration on anything or want to share your own stories, please feel free to do those in the comments and I will do my best to respond and to answer questions. And thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope everyone has a great day.